Okay.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the public presentation and Q&A for the position of Chief Sustainability Officer for the University of Minnesota. My name is Bill Paulus. I'm the Associate Vice President for Facilities Management on the Twin Cities campus and was co-chair of the search committee for this position. I'd like to thank our search committee members consisting of faculty, staff, and students from campuses across the University of Minnesota system. This new system-wide position is responsible for leading the sustainability strategy, planning, programs, and initiatives of the University of Minnesota. This position works collaboratively across the university system, building partnerships between academic and operations units in support of the university's sustainability goals and strategic priorities as defined in Impact 2025. The Chief Sustainability Officer works with other leaders at the university to implement a sustainability governance structure and drive an impactful approach to long and short-term sustainability initiatives. The format for today will begin with a presentation by the candidate. Once their presentation is concluded, we'll move into the Q&A portion. If you have a question you would like to ask, please email it to userve@umn.edu, and we will get to as many of those as time allows. This is the same link provided in an email announcing today's town hall. Today's candidate is Shane Stennes. Shane is currently the Director of Sustainability at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. You have all had the opportunity to review Shane's resume, so I won't go over it here. Shane has been asked to address the following question. Describe your vision for a comprehensive sustainability program at the University of Minnesota. How would you drive change working under a committee structure within the challenges inherent in a highly decentralized organization and acknowledging the reality of financial limitations that may impact the ability to do everything required to achieve that vision? And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Shane.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks to all the university's faculty, staff, students, alumni, partners, and friends who are watching today. It's an honor to be considered for the position of Chief Sustainability Officer and to have this opportunity to share my vision for a comprehensive sustainability program. I'm just going to take a minute to bring up some slides, and then I'll jump into my presentation. At the University of Minnesota, we serve the state and we impact the world. And there's probably no more important challenge on which we could impact our world than sustainability, and in particular, the climate crisis. Why is climate change such an important global issue? Because it impacts every aspect of our lives, including our health, our food, our physical security, our water resources, and it is unavoidable. Climate change affects the entire planet, all of humanity and the ecosystems we depend on. But it doesn't affect us all equally. We know climate change's impacts will fall heaviest on people that least contributed to it. Other parts of the world, the less affluent, people dependent on natural resources, and indigenous communities are just some of these individuals that will be impacted by climate change. Climate change is the defining issue of our time, and we already hear in Minnesota how it is impacting the communities we work with. You hear it from farmers. Standing in a northern Minnesota field with my father and a neighboring farmer more than 2 decades ago, I remember the farmer telling us how the rain didn't fall like it used to. It didn't come when it usually would, and when it did come, it fell too hard and in such great quantities that it washed out the crops, or it made it so you couldn't get into the fields. Years later, realizing the farmer was likely observing the first signs of climate change, it motivated me to pursue a career in sustainability. Visit with tribal members, and they will tell you how they worry about declining harvests of manoomin, or wild rice, the only native grain of North America. Climate change and other pollution negatively impact wild rice. The grain is highly sensitive to environmental changes, and loss of this life source would severely impact the traditions, environmental and human health, and economies of indigenous communities. You talk with people in communities in the urban core of Minneapolis and St. Paul, where I live, particularly communities of color and people in poverty, and they will tell you how much more difficult it is to cool off in the summer. Urban heat island effect coupled with climate change and the legacy of discriminatory housing have devastating impacts, including increased risk of heat-related diseases and death. And those in our tourism industry will tell you about lake ice melting earlier and earlier each year and reduced snowfall shortening the winter sports season. This threatens an important source of income for Minnesota's rural communities and imperils species that depend on the cold weather to flourish. These stories and so many others underscore how climate mitigation and adaptation is critical to our university's work. If we fail to take swift action, warming across the planet, including here in Minnesota, will be catastrophic, harming people, communities, and ecosystems. The MPAC 2025 system-wide strategic plan set an ambitious North Star for our work regarding climate change and other sustainability challenges. Realizing its vision to build a fully sustainable future will require collaboration, integration, and audacity. And these are the principles guiding my vision for the sustainability program. The importance of collaboration is underscored by another incredible challenge that humanity undertook, the moonshot. At the peak of the Apollo program, NASA employed over 400,000 people and was supported by over 20,000 industrial firms and universities. Addressing climate change will be even harder than landing humans on the moon and returning them to Earth. Our fossil fuel-based energy system alone was built up over more than 150 years, and we have less than 30 years to completely transform it. Tackling challenges of this magnitude requires robust external partnerships and novel collaborations within our institution. External collaborations are critical in a number of different ways. They enable us to learn from the experience of other organizations and to share our experience in return. They bring community voices, wisdom, and knowledge into our work. External partnerships are a primary way we deliver positive impacts to Minnesota communities. And they often are how we work with governments, NGOs, and the private sector to affect change on the national and international scale. Fortunately, we have existing external partnerships and collaborations at the university that accomplish these things and more. I've listed on the screen some of the partnerships that I've worked with over the years, and I know there are countless more out there. Maintaining and building on these existing partnerships will enable us to have impact at the scale and speed required to meet the challenge. We will also need to build new partnerships, particularly with communities that have been historically marginalized in order to serve all Minnesotans. As environmentalist Heather McTeer-Toney wrote, community is the lens that is so often left out of the environmental discussion, but it's vital for identifying real solutions. Fostering novel internal collaborations will be imperative as well. University campuses are truly unique in what they bring together in one space. We have engaged student and employee stakeholders who are interested in affecting change through the classroom and through their research. We have academics with deep expertise. We have operations staff with experience and applied knowledge. And we have sustainability challenges that are significant and representative of issues that are found outside the institution. As I have seen in my role and in my office through the university's Living Lab program and other academic operations collaborations, this is a potent combination when harnessed. Supporting students, faculty, instructors, researchers, and operations staff in coming together to solve our toughest campus sustainability challenges is one of our greatest opportunities. Beyond the campus level, we must also foster collaboration across the system. We have tremendous wisdom and experience across our institution regarding sustainability, and our system and the systemness that we have is one of our greatest strengths. Insight often comes from unexpected places, and we need to create ways to recognize and learn from our whole community. We also have challenges that can only be solved if we work as a system. When we work as a system, we tap into greater capacity for action and impact. As I think about our potential to work as a system, it calls to mind the following quote from Dwight Eisenhower. Whenever I run into a problem I can't solve, I always make it bigger. I can never solve it by trying to make it smaller, but if I make it big enough, I can begin to see the outlines of a solution. In addition to partnership and collaboration, weaving sustainability throughout the organizational fabric of the institution will be critical to pursuing our vision. Prior to sustainability, I studied and worked in human resources. Human resources is a discipline rooted in organizational psychology. Fundamentally, we strive to answer the question, how do we develop the organization and its people to achieve a particular goal? In HR, we use a number of frameworks to help us answer that question. I've applied these tools often in my sustainability work, and they will be essential in realizing our sustainability and climate protection goals. Our goals cannot be accomplished unless other aspects of the organization, things like skills of employees, organizational systems and structures, operating principles, finances, and communications are all aligned to support them. We can apply these HR frameworks and tools to ensure key organizational activities further our shared values and goals rather than impede them. When I consider how my prior background in HR has helped me in sustainability work, it also illustrates how critical other disciplines are to addressing sustainability and climate. Often there is a perspective that sustainability is only the domain of certain disciplines. Nothing could be further from the truth. This work can and must engage people from all areas of the institution, from the humanities, arts, and social sciences, the health sciences, business, law, policy, and physical and life sciences. All of these disciplines and many more at the institution have a role to play. Sustainability problems broadly affect everyone, so it only makes sense that addressing them requires broad participation. As we look to build a fully sustainable future, we must remember that sustainability program cannot truly be comprehensive if it is not one in which the broadest participation is invited and encouraged, where diverse people from across our communities have a seat at the table. The final pillar of my vision for a comprehensive sustainability program is simply to be bold. This is no time to be timid, particularly in regard to climate change. Climate scientists have clearly stated that we must make dramatic emissions reductions this decade to avoid catastrophic impacts. It's time for transformational rather than incremental change. Time for setting bold objectives that will complement and drive forward the vision to build a fully sustainable future. Big goals can be inspiring and engaging, but audacious goals mean nothing if they're not followed by action, a commitment of resources, and a willingness to take risks and sometimes fail. We must marry our ambition with our effort. Building a fully sustainable future is perhaps the biggest, most challenging thing we will undertake. But we can do it as a university because we have the community to make this happen. We have passionate students who want to be engaged and involved in their campus community and beyond. We have faculty, teachers, researchers with deep expertise across a breadth of disciplines. We have extension and outreach staff with strong relationships in the communities they serve. We have tremendous partners outside the institution. And we have staff, advisors, custodians, engineers, lab technicians, and many more people in roles than we can recognize here that are dedicated to advancing sustainability through the work they do every day. As I think about that work ahead, I'm inspired by the proverb, if you want to move fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Of course, we need to do both. And as CSO, my goal will be to create systems and structures so members of the university community can contribute their talent and their passion to do both, to go alone and together, to go fast and far through integration, collaboration, and having the audacity to build a fully sustainable future for Minnesota and the world. Thank you.
All right. Great. Shane, thank you for that informative and insightful presentation. You covered some of these topics already in the presentation, but I'm going to offer you the questions that were submitted to see if you have some additional comments you would like to speak to. Okay, here's your first question. In your opinion, how does the integration of diversity play into sustainability, and why does this matter?
So I think diversity and thinking about equity and justice is a critical part of what we do in sustainability work. Often we're talking about sustainability, and I think people naturally gravitate toward an explanation that sustainability is about environmental issues, and that's certainly a dimension of it. But we're often doing this work in support and service of people, and I think that that's something that sometimes gets lost in the conversation. And in particular, we know that, as I mentioned in my presentation, certain populations of people, particularly people of color, communities globally in the developing world, they are going to suffer greater harms as a result of some of our sustainability challenges, even though they contributed least to them, least to causing them. And so I think in terms of how diversity has to be and equity has to be a guiding principle in what we do in terms of sustainability work. The question then is, how do we do that as an institution? And I think a large part of that is, how do we ground that in every conversation we're having and reflecting on, whether choices and decisions that we're making or programs that we're designing are advancing that goal of equity, or if they are countermanding it. So I think that is a component in a way that I would start approaching this and thinking about equity and diversity and inclusion and justice being a real part and core portion of our sustainability framework.
Okay, thanks. Next question. From a system-wide perspective, how would you encourage and support local or regional leadership and initiatives that may have relatively smaller but still significant impact and innovative possibility?
Yeah, so we will have to innovate both in terms of our campus goals around sustainability, as well as how we think about the core mission of research and teaching and outreach to deliver the sustainability impacts that we want and that we're striving for under the strategic plan and in other goals that we might set. In order to do that, we're going to have to experiment. We're going to have to try new things. And of course, when we do those experiments, we are not going to try apply them across the entirety of the system or all of our programmatic offerings at once. And so I think that this is a unique way, in a real compelling way, in which we can do what the questioner is describing, of finding ways to incentivize, encourage, support local innovation as sort of seeds, planting seeds of change and watering them and seeing if they grow. And if they do, then we think about how do we bring that to the broader system. And I think that, my conversation and my points that I was making during the presentation, where I'm talking about how do we integrate sustainability into the existing decisions and existing structures we have, is one way that we can start to tackle this question about, supporting innovation at the local level, that then we can grow and expand to other places when it proves scalable and when it really demonstrates that it has that capacity to apply to other contexts.
All right, thank you. Next question. How do you bring about real substantive change in this area? And how do you ensure our efforts aren't just greenwashing the problem?
It's a great question. The way I think we bring real substantive changes is by doing what I described in terms of setting bold goals and then following those up with concrete action plans for how we're going to get there whenever possible. So a good example of this is in 2011, I was involved with the Twin Cities Campus Sustainability Committee and supporting them as they were developing the university's or the campus's first climate action plan. And in that climate action planning process, we set what at the time was a really ambitious goal of reducing emissions 50% by 2021. The plan included detailed categories of actions that we would take. And then over the course of the next decade, we were responsible, and my office worked really closely with lots of different stakeholders at the university to see that those were implemented and to advance the implementation of that plan so we could realize our goal. So I think, this maybe seems too reductionist, but I do think that there's a lot to be said for this model of setting bold goals, creating plans for implementation, and then making sure that we have the staff capacity and the alignment organizationally to implement those plans so we actually are, delivering on the commitments that we make.
Great. Again, you've spoken to some of these in the presentation, but I'm going to give you a chance to keep following up on some. Next question. What do you see as some of the main challenges for the University of Minnesota to advance its sustainability program?
I think one of the main challenges that I didn't cover as much that I want to speak to is the breadth of the place. It is a big organization with operations across all 87 counties of the state of Minnesota, and it's very diffuse. And so I think one of the biggest challenges that we'll have is how do we, as a diffuse organization with lots of different stakeholders and different people that have a role and a say in what's happening, ensure that we're also kind of providing some continuity and a North Star institutionally to advance things, and trying to find ways that we can interconnect and collaborate together, and knowing that that will be really challenging in an organization of our size. We also know, and it has been my experience, that we're a very consensus-driven organization, and that is a really important part of our institutional culture. And we also know that that takes time, and some of the challenges that we have ahead of ourselves require incredible speed. And so I think that this is another sort of tension that we will have to figure out how do we work through, is providing those opportunities for broad participation and that consensus-driven approach that we have institutionally, while also moving at the pace that's required in order to tackle many of these difficult challenges, particularly things around climate change.
All right, thank you. One question submitted relates to environmental practices for land care and reducing the amount of manicured lawns. What are your thoughts about balancing campus aesthetics with environmental land care practices?
So I'll take this, response beyond land care, because I think this question, you could substitute land care in different practices for lots of other different topics. So I think it's broadly applicable. As an institution of higher education, and one where we have this model of shared governance, and one where we have this model of a broad population in the community we're trying to serve, I think the thing that we have here is we're making decisions together as a community, and that we have a broad group of stakeholders who have very sometimes different needs and desires around different spaces. And we will have to use and really tap into our kind of collective decision-making processes around some of these key questions to try to build some consensus around what it is that we want institutionally. In terms of land care specifically, my office on the Twin Cities campus has worked pretty closely with our land care team, and they have done a very nice job of thinking about, like, what are the spaces that are very manicured, and for a variety of reasons we might want to keep, and that they would stay as manicured spaces, and which ones where we have more capacity now and in the future to think about alternative ways that we treat and manage those spaces for sort of greater and better sustainability outcomes. And so I think that that's another way that we can approach this too, is thinking about right strategy at the right time, and recognizing that there are certain spaces that will need to be maintained in a certain way, and other ones where we may have some more flexibility to pursue things like urban prairies or urban meadows, like we have on the West Bank as an example.
Okay, great, thanks. We have a few questions relating to the university's investment in fossil fuels. How will you work with senior leaders to provide transparency to students, faculty, and staff related to university investments?
Yeah, I think that this is certainly a topic that's animated a lot of conversation among students and faculty and staff over time, and certainly in the more recent past. And I think that that is something that my office has been engaged with the Office of Investment Banking about how we'll do exactly what the questioner is asking, providing some more transparency. And one of the ways that we've talked about doing this is through our STARS report. So STARS stands for Sustainable Tracking Assessment Rating System. It is one of two external tools that we've identified for measuring sustainability progress and performance at the university. And these are measures that are part of our strategic plan. And in the STARS framework are metrics and data points around investments in the endowment, as an example, that that'll be a mechanism by which we will, provide more transparency to the public, and then in turn be able to, I think, have some informed conversations with senior leaders with the Office of Investment Banking about what other practices exist out there, what opportunities exist in this space, and how and when might we pursue those in terms of addressing some of the concerns that have been raised. So I think that is one tool and one approach that we are looking to use in order to address some of what the questioner had surfaced there.
Great, thanks. Next question. How will you increase engagement with sustainability researchers on campus to ensure state-of-the-art technologies and approaches in the design of our life on campus? For example, redesign of food menus and spaces, and also addressing gaps in Scope 3 emissions.
So we have done some things in the past, which I want to speak to, and then we have a few things coming up that I think would be replicable across the system. So the things in the past, we have right now what's called Living Lab, which is a program and a collaboration between the operations staff at the institution and some of the academic staff to make available on-campus spaces for applied research, demonstration projects, and student learning opportunities. And these can take a lot of different forms, where we're allocating space on campus for, say, a citizen science garden that promotes, citizen science research around pollinators. We've done this in the context of community gardens on the West Bank. So I think that there are, that can be one mechanism that we can think about. How do we grow and expand that to not just include exterior spaces and lands, but also interior environments as well, as a mechanism for facilitating that sort of dialogue and conversation. The other one is, this last legislative session, we were appropriated some money from the Minnesota State Legislature to help advance sustainability and the Impact 2025 goals around sustainability at the institution. And so my office has worked really closely with the Institute of the Environment and others at the university to develop what we're calling like a sustainability innovation fund that would fund research grants to faculty members. And one of the dimensions that we're looking at around that is faculty members who are partnering with campus operations on different research projects and pursuing funding and opportunities that involve a team approach with a faculty member and, say, like a campus staff, with the intent of trying to advance and solve campus sustainability challenges. So those are just two things that spring to mind for me, and I'm sure there's others, and I look forward to talking to the research community about other ways that we can, sort of narrow that gap and find ways to collaborate together.
Great. Next question. What networks or relationships across the higher ed and the sustainability sectors will you bring to your work so that UMN can lead on sustainability and bring other institutions along with us? You spoke to that a little bit, but maybe the second part. How will those networks help or advance your work as Chief Sustainability Officer?
Sure. So we're actively, and have been for a number of years, actively engaged in the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. It's the largest professional association for sustainability in higher ed. And we work really closely with members across that to share lessons learned. So as a quick example, I mentioned earlier, climate and climate mitigation planning. One of the elements in the Impact 2025 plan is developing new climate action plans, new mitigation plans for each of our campuses. And so we've been using that network of peers to consult broadly about how they approach their climate action plan, because it's been more than 10 years since we did our last one on the Twin Cities. And what lessons learned and what sort of approaches can we take, and also what strategies did they identify that might be transferable here to this environment? So that's one network. I'm also really actively engaged in part of a group of Big Ten sustainability staff that meets regularly to do very similar things, but with a context of the Big Ten, and thinking about how do we advance our work collectively together and have greater impact working as a conference and a group of sustainability staff, and not just as individual colleges and universities. And then the final thing I would mention is, several years ago, from a sustainability perspective on the Twin Cities campus, we began to talk about how we are not going to be able to advance our sustainability goals unless we are engaged in collaborating and in coalition with others to change the broader set of services and systems. And what I mean by that is the University of Minnesota is subject to, or is integrated into, a broader transportation system. And we play a part of it, but we don't control many pieces of it. So we need to engage proactively in that transportation system if we want it to be more sustainable. Same thing around energy systems, food systems. And so one of the things that we started doing is partnering with our academic colleagues and engaging in groups like the Minnesota Sustainable Growth Coalition, which is a group of mostly companies, but also the U of M and the state of Minnesota, to figure out how do we sort of bend the curve and make our economy here in Minnesota and become a regional and national leader around circular economy. So thinking about how do we, instead of a take, make, waste cycle, we create a regenerative cycle in Minnesota along a number of different dimensions. So I think it's collaboration with higher ed, collaboration with professional associations, collaboration with the private sector and other entities are going to be really critical for our success.
All right, thanks. Our question to you refers to working in a highly decentralized organization. Can you comment on how that affects your approach to us accomplishing our goal of a fully sustainable future?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the point that I made in the presentation around the importance of integration, that as a decentralized organization, we have both formal and informal decision-making networks and procedures and places as an institution. And so it can be a hard place to get your hands around how to affect change. And I think one of the key pieces that we can do is to make sure that we're much more intentionally integrating sustainability into those different decision points that are key for accomplishing our sustainability objectives and outcomes. And so that's going to be a kind of critical focus for me, is thinking about identifying where those places are and then identifying how do we integrate sustainability into those better. In order to do that, one of the first things that I want to do if hired for the CSO role is to go out and meet with people on campuses, at the research and outreach centers across our entire enterprise, at their home and in their locations, to better understand a couple things. One, what do they see as strengths, independent or irrespective of sustainability, and that they're proud of? What do they see as challenges for their location or their campus? And then from there, I think, by building those relationships, we can start to have more informed conversations around how does sustainability help to augment those strengths, and then also address some of those challenges, and where can it be integrated in a way that is really seamless and included in their day-to-day activity, and not something that is separate and added on as kind of an afterthought.
Great. How would you measure the success of a system-wide sustainability program?
Yeah, I think we will at least first go back to that STARS and that Times Higher Ed Impact Rankings tool that I mentioned before. Those are two comprehensive looks at sustainability and measurement systems that we can use to assess our progress relative to peers outside of our institution, and also relative to objective standards. And I think that that's really critical, is to have the ability and capacity to do both. The other way I think is that we'll measure progress on this, or that I would like to measure progress on this, is by us taking that building a fully sustainable future vision and goal, and identifying a couple key areas and themes that we really want to drive progress on, that we think would be really important, not only for us internally as a university, but also important in terms of our impact and our reach within the state and beyond. And then from there, really think about what are the right measures in those key areas. So I think one that naturally emerges is climate change, and all the content and subject matter around climate change will be certainly one of those areas, but I don't think it has to be the only one. I think that there's opportunities to think about how do we drive and identify other areas of excellence that we really think are critical to the biggest challenges of the state, that we also have unique capabilities and capacity to contribute in terms of solving.
Okay, thanks, Shane. That actually reaches the end of all of our submitted questions for you. Any final comments before we wrap up today?
Only that, I think that this is a unique opportunity to really distinguish ourselves as a university and to have greater impact, even more so than we already are having today in terms of our sustainability aspirations and in service of the state and the world. And I appreciate the opportunity to be considered for this, and really look forward to hearing the decision from the university. This is a fantastic moment, and I think the time is right for us to basically increase our leadership in this space. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you to you, Shane, and to everyone else who was participating today. For those participating, if you would please take time to fill out a candidate evaluation. I know that our senior leaders appreciate having your feedback. You'll find a link to that evaluation in the email you received announcing this event. As a reminder, we have a town hall scheduled on Thursday for the next finalist for the Chief Sustainability Officer, and hope you can join us for that